I recently found out I legally own my childhood home and half of a life insurance policy after my stepmother's death, but my stepsister is making everything difficult. Some background. My dad passed away suddenly when I was 17. He'd been married to my stepmother for about 5 years at that point. My stepsister was 15 when it happened. I was devastated. My dad and I were super close, and he was the only real parent I had after my mom left when I was little. According to Dad's will, my stepmother could live in our family farmhouse until she died, but then ownership would transfer solely to me. I found out recently that he also had a life insurance policy that, since no beneficiary was specifically named, legally splits between remaining family members. Anyway, about a week after my dad's funeral, I came home from school to find all my stuff in garbage bags on the front porch. My stepmother had changed the locks and basically told me to find somewhere else to live. I was a freaking high school kid with nowhere to go. I crashed with friends until graduation, then joined the military because I literally had no other options. Fast forward to last month, I got a call from a lawyer informing me that my stepmother had passed away. According to the will, I now legally own the rural farmhouse where I grew up. The lawyer also mentioned I'm entitled to half of a life insurance policy, over $400K total. This was all news to me. After talking it over with my wife, I decided to drive the 3 hours to see the place. I hadn't been back in almost 30 years, and I honestly wasn't sure what to expect. When I pulled up, the property didn't look how I remembered it from my childhood. Mini update before I continue. My wife wanted to come with me, but I thought this was something I needed to do alone. In hindsight, I should have brought her for moral support. As I walked up, the front door opened, and my stepsister came out with her arms crossed. I barely recognized her. We haven't spoken since I was kicked out all those years ago. "What are you doing here?" she demanded. I tried to stay calm and explained that legally I own the property now and just wanted to see it. She blocked the doorway and insisted I had no right to be there, even though I own the place. That's when she told me she's been living in the house with her 2 kids and her mother-in-law who needs special care. She moved them all in 4 years ago after her divorce. I had no idea about any of this. We haven't exactly kept in touch. When I mentioned the life insurance policy, her demeanor changed. She started shouting about how I abandoned the family decades ago and don't deserve a cent of her mother's money. I pointed out that I was thrown out as a teenager and never allowed to return, but she dismissed this as ancient history and dramatic exaggeration. The situation got worse when she threatened to call the police and have me arrested for trespassing on my own property that I legally own. Her son appeared in the doorway, and I decided it wasn't worth escalating things further. I reluctantly left, feeling this mix of emotions about being back at my childhood home only to be rejected again. The whole 3-hour drive back, I couldn't stop thinking about how messed up the situation is. My wife suggested we consult with a lawyer about both the house and insurance situation before making any decisions. Here's where I'm stuck. On one hand, this house and money are legally mine. After being kicked out as a teenager and struggling for years while they lived comfortably, I feel like I'm entitled to what my dad wanted me to have. The insurance money would make a huge difference for my family. We could pay off our mortgage and put money aside for our daughter's college fund. On the other hand, I'm torn about potentially making my stepsister's family homeless, especially considering her elderly mother-in-law who needs care. They've clearly been living there for years, and it's their home. I don't have any emotional attachment to the house anymore, but I can't ignore that other people do. The insurance company is holding the money until this is resolved, and I have to decide what to do about the property. My wife thinks we should stick to our legal rights and maybe offer my stepsister some time to find alternative arrangements, but not give up what's rightfully mine. I've been going back and forth about this for weeks now. Part of me wants to just sign everything over to avoid the drama and finally close this chapter of my life. Another part feels like after everything that happened, I shouldn't have to give up what my dad intended for me to have. And honestly, her attitude when I showed up didn't exactly make me feel generous. I've tried talking to people close to me, but they're all taking sides about whether I should be more understanding or protect my interests, and it's making everything worse. I'm just trying to figure out what the right thing to do is here. Now for the first update. Holy crap, I didn't expect my post to blow up like that. Rip my inbox, seriously. Thank you all for the supportive comments and advice about my inheritance situation. I've been trying to read everything, even though there's literally thousands of comments. After that confrontation with my stepsister at the farmhouse, I took the advice that so many of you suggested, shout out to you, Legal Eagle 452 and others, and consulted with an attorney. The meeting confirmed exactly what most of you said. I'm 100% legally entitled to both the house and my portion of the insurance money. The attorney was actually pretty surprised at how clear-cut the situation is from a legal perspective. Apparently, inheritance disputes are usually way messier. Turns out the insurance policy is worth exactly $428,000, which means my half is $214,000. That's $214,000 for our family. We could pay off about 80% of our mortgage and still have enough left for our daughter's college fund. My wife was practically in tears when we realized what this would mean for our financial security. Here's where things get interesting. And by interesting, I mean infuriating. According to the attorney, my stepsister was actually notified about the house transfer 6 months ago when our stepmother entered hospice care. The lawyer who handled the estate sent multiple letters and emails explaining the situation, all of which she apparently ignored. So her whole shocked act when I showed up was not genuine. Not surprised, honestly. Even worse, I discovered she's been renting out the renovated barn on the property to tenants while claiming she owns the place. The attorney said this could potentially be considered fraud since she knew she wasn't the legal owner. Some of you mentioned in the comments that I should check if she was generating income from the property, and you were correct. I tried reaching out to her through email a few times, as recommended by my attorney, keeping everything in writing, to see if we could resolve this reasonably. Her responses were not reasonable. She demanded the entire insurance payout and insisted she needed at least a year to find alternative housing that could accommodate her mother-in-law's health needs. No acknowledgement of the fact that she's been living rent-free in a house she doesn't own for years. For those asking about the mother-in-law's condition, I don't have details, but apparently she requires some kind of specialized care setup. I'm sympathetic to that situation, but that doesn't change the legal reality of who owns the house. The insurance company scheduled a meeting at their local branch office to try and resolve the policy distribution. I spent the entire 3-hour drive alternating between rehearsing what I wanted to say and listening to calming podcasts to keep my blood pressure in check. Thanks to whoever recommended the deep breathing exercises. They actually helped. When I got to the bank where the meeting was arranged, I felt calm, but also unwell. Normal reaction, right? The insurance representative was this very professional woman in her 50s who clearly had seen plenty of family disputes before. She explained that since no specific beneficiary was named in the policy, state law dictates how it's divided among remaining family members. My stepsister showed up 20 minutes late with her son, the same one who was at the house during my first visit. She completely ignored me, wouldn't even make eye contact, and spoke only to the representative. The whole time, she kept emphasizing how difficult things had been financially since Mom's death and all the sacrifices she had made over the years. This is where it gets really interesting. She pulled out a folder of medical bills and caretaking expenses, insisting these should be covered by the entire insurance payout before any division occurs. When I questioned some of the dates on the bills, some were from before our stepmother was even sick, she got defensive and accused me of calling her a liar. The insurance representative was flipping through the documents. She finally looked up and mentioned finding some discrepancies in the paperwork, including what appeared to be altered dates on several documents. And then her whole demeanor changed. She started crying. Several of you predicted this exact tactic in the comments, and talking about how difficult her life has been since her divorce, how she's been struggling to support her kids alone while caring for her mother and mother-in-law. The whole time there was this subtle implication that I've had it easy all these years while she struggled. The insurance representative was unmoved, bless this woman, and explained that regardless of sympathy, the policy has clear legal guidelines for distribution. The company would need to investigate the discrepancies in the submitted documents before proceeding with any payments. My stepsister stormed out in tears, with her son following looking completely embarrassed. To address some common questions from the previous post, 1. Yes, I have all the original documentation of my father's will and the property transfer. 2. No, there's no question about the legal validity of my claim. 3. I haven't been back to the house since that first visit. 4. My wife still thinks I should just sell the place once this is resolved. After the meeting, I was heading to my car when the stepsister's son approached me in the parking lot. This was the first time we'd actually spoken, and I was a bit wary given everything that had happened. The kid, well, he's probably early 20s, but everyone looks like a kid to me these days, actually apologized for his mother's behavior. He said he had no idea about the true ownership of the house or the history between our families. According to him, his mom has been struggling financially for years, but refuses help or advice from anyone. He seemed genuinely concerned about her increasingly desperate decisions that have been affecting their whole family. Part of me felt bad for them, but another part remembered being thrown out with garbage bags at 17 with nowhere to go. During the 3-hour drive home, my thoughts were conflicted. I felt empathy for my stepsister's situation and anger about the decades of mistreatment and current dishonesty. My wife listened patiently when I got home and reminded me that having compassion doesn't mean I have to give up what's legally mine. She's always been the wise one in our relationship. That evening, the conflict took another turn when I started receiving a series of increasingly aggressive text messages from my stepsister. She threatened to tell everyone that I'm trying to steal her inheritance and make her family homeless if I don't give up my claim. I didn't respond, attorney's advice, but saved screenshots of everything. As many of you suggested, documentation is key. Edit for clarification. Some people asked about the tax implications. Yes, I've discussed this with both my attorney and a financial advisor. The inheritance itself isn't taxable in our state, but there may be property tax implications depending on what I decide to do with the house. The next few weeks will be crucial as we wait for the insurance company's investigation and figure out how to proceed with the property situation. I'm trying to balance being fair with protecting what my father wanted me to have, and I appreciate all the perspectives you've shared so far. I'll post another update when there are significant developments in either the insurance or property situation. Now for the second update. You all were right about my stepsister escalating things with the inheritance situation. Seriously, your predictions in the comments were spot on. I should have been prepared for what happened next, but somehow it still caught me off guard. It's been 2 weeks since that insurance meeting, and things have gone from bad to complete chaos. First, I want to thank everyone who sent supportive messages and advice. There were thousands, and I couldn't respond to all of them, but I read every single one. The attorney I hired has been absolutely worth every penny. Thanks to everyone who insisted I get legal representation. After all those threatening texts from my stepsister, my attorney suggested I avoid any direct communication with her. She has been sending increasingly unhinged emails demanding I sign over her inheritance. I've been forwarding everything to my lawyer without responding, documenting everything, just like many of you advised. The biggest development came 3 days ago when I received documentation from the insurance company proving the policy was actually taken out by my father and stepmother jointly when they got married. The paperwork explicitly states it was meant to benefit all their children equally. This contradicts my stepsister's claim that she deserves the entire amount because mom paid for it all these years. The insurance agent also confirmed they found multiple discrepancies in the documents my stepsister submitted. She actually tried to forge paperwork to make herself the sole beneficiary. My attorney sent formal notice to my stepsister giving her 60 days to vacate the property, as required by state law. We even offered a $5,000 relocation allowance as a gesture of goodwill. Completely unnecessary legally, but I was trying to be somewhat decent despite everything. Her response was a 1-sentence email. "I'll leave when hell freezes over." Very mature. To complicate matters further, my work suddenly moved up the deadline for this overseas project I've been leading. Instead of having 3 months to deal with this house situation, I now have barely 30 days before I'll be gone for several months. My teenage daughter has been asking questions about her grandfather and our family history ever since this whole inheritance thing started. She never met my dad since he passed long before she was born, and I honestly haven't talked much about that part of my life. Too painful, I guess. Last weekend, she asked if we could visit the house before any decisions were made about selling it. I was hesitant, but figured it might give us both some closure. So yesterday, my daughter and I made the 3-hour drive to the old farmhouse. I was very anxious the whole way there, kept expecting my stepsister to call with more threats. When we pulled up to the property, there was a brand new private property, no trespassing sign at the entrance to the driveway, considering I'm the legal owner. What really threw me was seeing 6 or 7 cars parked in the driveway and along the road. At first, I thought maybe my stepsister had family over, but something felt off. My daughter noticed it too and asked what was happening. We decided to check it out since, it's legally my house. As we approached, I could see people walking in and out carrying various items. Some woman was loading what looked like an antique lamp into her car. That's when I realized my stepsister was having an estate sale. She was selling off the house contents that she has no legal right to sell. I knocked on the door, trying to stay calm, and an elderly woman I'd never seen before answered. She looked confused when I explained I was the homeowner. Before she could respond, my stepsister appeared, looking shocked to see me there with my daughter. She quickly pulled the elderly woman away, whispering something that made the woman look at me suspiciously. Inside was an estate sale in progress. There were price tags on furniture, artwork, even kitchen appliances. What upset me was seeing my father's antique desk, the one specifically mentioned in his will as being left to me, with a $350 price tag on it. There were other items too that I recognized as being specifically listed in my inheritance. His collection of vintage baseball memorabilia, the grandfather clock from his family, even his old vinyl record collection. When I confronted my stepsister, she claimed she had every right to sell everything since they belonged to Mom. I reminded her that I had documentation proving many items were specifically left to me in my father's will. She told me to take it up with her lawyer, the one she supposedly can't afford. Things got even worse when my daughter spotted a cardboard box labeled "Family Photos, $5, sitting on a folding table. She immediately went over and started looking through them, finding pictures of my dad, me as a kid, and even some of my grandparents that I hadn't seen in decades. When she picked up the box, my stepsister tried to grab it from her hands, saying everything was for sale and nothing could leave without payment. My daughter refused to let go and said, "These are pictures of my grandfather. They belong to our family." I was so proud of her in that moment, even though the situation was uncomfortable. One of the estate sale attendees, apparently a friend of my stepsister, started filming the whole confrontation on her phone while my stepsister loudly proclaimed I was an estranged relative trying to steal from a grieving family. Several people were staring at us, believing her version of events. I decided it wasn't worth escalating further with my daughter there. We left with just the box of photos, though it was very difficult to walk away from my father's belongings. My daughter was visibly upset on the drive home, asking why her aunt, technically step-aunt, but whatever, would lie like that and try to sell family photos. The drive back gave us time to talk about my father and my childhood before everything fell apart. I showed her some of the photos from the box, telling her stories about my dad that I hadn't shared before. It was actually therapeutic in a weird way, though I still felt sick about what was happening at the house. That evening, a neighbor from my hometown, who I'm still connected with on social media, sent me screenshots of posts my stepsister had made in local community Facebook groups. She was portraying herself as a struggling single mother caring for an elderly relative, claiming I suddenly appeared after 28 years, demanding she leave her home immediately after her mother's death. The comments were full of people offering support and condemning me, without knowing any actual facts, of course. Edit. To clarify, my stepsister has known about the property situation for over 6 months since my stepmother entered hospice care. The attorney handling the estate sent multiple notifications that ownership would transfer to me upon my stepmother's death. This wasn't a surprise attack. She's had plenty of time to make arrangements, but chose to ignore the situation completely. I immediately called my attorney and explained everything about the unauthorized estate sale. He recommended filing for an emergency injunction to stop the sale of items from the house, especially those specifically mentioned in my father's will. He also suggested we could accelerate the eviction process based on her unauthorized sale of property that doesn't belong to her. The court hearing is scheduled for tomorrow morning. My attorney seems confident we'll get the injunction, but I'm still very anxious. The thought of more of my father's possessions being sold off before I can stop it is keeping me up at night. What makes it worse is knowing some items might already be gone forever. My wife thinks I should just give up on the whole situation, sell the house as is once we get possession, and move on with our lives. Part of me agrees with her. This drama is exhausting, but another part feels like I'd be letting my father down after he specifically wanted me to have these things. The insurance company has officially ruled that the policy will be split as legally required, with my half, $214,000, to be distributed once all the paperwork clears. At least that part is moving forward, though my stepsister is apparently filing some kind of appeal. According to the insurance agent, it has no chance of success given the evidence of attempted fraud. My daughter has been sorting through the family photos we rescued, putting them in albums, and asking questions about the people and places in them. It's bittersweet watching her connect with a family history she never knew, all while this ugly battle continues. I never thought things would get this complicated with an inheritance that should have been straightforward. I'll update again after the court hearing when I hopefully have more clarity about what happens next. Now for the final update. Final update. The inheritance saga is finally over, and you guys were right about everything. First of all, thank you to everyone who's been following this wild ride and offering advice. Your support has honestly been the one bright spot in this whole mess, especially those who told me to document everything. You absolute legends. It's been about 3 weeks since my last update, and the court hearing went exactly as my attorney predicted. The judge granted our emergency injunction to prevent my stepsister from selling anything else from the house, and even approved an accelerated eviction timeline. Instead of the standard 60 days, she was given only 30 days to vacate based on the evidence of her unauthorized estate sale, and what the judge called a clear pattern of deceptive behavior. Mini update before I continue. The insurance company completed their investigation and officially confirmed the attempted fraud. They've released my portion of the funds, $214,000, which is already in my account. My stepsister's portion is being held pending a separate fraud investigation. After the hearing, I got a call from one of my dad's fishing buddies. He saw my stepsister's Facebook posts about me trying to steal her inheritance and reached out. Turns out, he was actually a witness when my dad updated his will after marrying my stepmom. He had a copy of an inventory document listing exactly which items in the house were specifically designated as mine in the will. I forwarded everything to my attorney, who filed it with the court as additional evidence. With my overseas work assignment coming up fast, I realized I wouldn't be around for the actual eviction deadline. My attorney recommended hiring a property management company that specializes in these situations. They would handle the final walkthrough, changing locks, and securing the property while I was gone. It was expensive, about $2,500 for their services, but honestly seemed worth every penny to avoid another confrontation. I spent the next few weeks focused on getting ready for my work trip and trying to put the whole situation out of my mind. My daughter had organized all the family photos we rescued into digital albums, which was actually really therapeutic for both of us. She kept asking questions about my childhood and my father, and for the first time in decades, I found myself able to talk about him. On the final day of the eviction period, I drove up with a representative from the property management company. My attorney had arranged for a sheriff's deputy to meet us there to ensure a peaceful transition. I was incredibly nervous the whole drive. When we arrived, there was no sign of my stepsister or her family. The deputy knocked and announced himself, and after getting no response, confirmed we could enter the property. Nothing could have prepared me for what we found inside. The house was trashed. The deputy immediately started documenting everything, taking photos and noting it in his report. The property manager said it was one of the worst revenge trashings she'd seen in 15 years of work. The missing items were the most painful part. All the things specifically mentioned in my father's will, the antique desk, his vinyl collection, the grandfather clock, were gone. The property manager suggested filing a separate police report for theft, since we had documentation proving these items were legally mine. While documenting the damage upstairs, I noticed the attic access panel was slightly open. On a hunch, I pulled down the ladder and climbed up with my flashlight. There was a locked trunk I'd never seen before. The property manager helped me bring it down, and after some struggle with the lock, we managed to get it open. Inside were my father's personal effects: his military service medals, old journals, his watch collection, and most importantly, a bundle of letters. They were letters he had written to me during the last months of his life when he knew he was dying. Letters my stepmother had never given me. I sat down and started reading them. In letter after letter, my father talked about how proud he was of me, how much he loved me, and his hopes for my future. He wrote about regrets he had and lessons he hoped I'd learn. The last one was dated just 3 days before he died, where he apologized for not being stronger during his illness and for leaving me too soon. I'm not ashamed to admit I completely broke down. Just as I was gathering myself, my stepsister arrived with her son, her daughter, and several other relatives I recognized. She stormed in, shouting that I had no right to be there before her moving deadline at midnight. She stopped when she saw the deputy. When she noticed me sitting there with my father's letters, she reacted. She tried to grab them, screaming that anything in the house belonged to her mother and now to her. The deputy stepped between us, explaining to everyone present the legal ownership of the property, the terms of the eviction order, and warning about the consequences of destroying property. That's when the property manager pulled out a folder. She presented evidence they'd gathered during their investigation. She explained that all of this had been filed with the court and local police department. What happened next honestly surprised me more than anything else in this saga. My stepsister's son stepped forward and said, "Mom, this has to stop. You've been lying to all of us for years." He turned to me and apologized, saying he'd had no idea how bad things had gotten. Apparently, after our last encounter, he'd started asking questions and discovered just how much his mother had been hiding from everyone. My stepsister didn't take this well. She called her son a traitor, said some awful things to him, and stormed out. Her daughter followed her, but most of the other family members stayed behind. Her son explained that she'd been telling everyone a different version of events for years, that I had abandoned the family, refused to help with my stepmother's care, and was trying to take everything for herself. Learning the truth had clearly been a wake-up call for many of them. As they were leaving, her son hesitated at the door and said, "You should know that my grandmother talked about you in her final weeks. She expressed regret about how she treated you after your dad died, said it was the biggest mistake of her life." He didn't offer details, and honestly, I didn't ask for them. Some closure comes too late to matter. After everyone left, I spent another hour reading through my father's letters. The property manager changed all the locks and secured the property as best she could given the damage. The deputy filed his report about the condition of the house and the missing items. My attorney called that evening after reviewing the reports. She strongly recommended pressing charges for the property damage and theft, saying we had an airtight case. After a long discussion with my wife, I decided against it. The damage was done, and dragging this through criminal court wouldn't bring back my father's possessions or undo the decades of pain. I just wanted it to be over. The property management company found a contractor to begin repairs on the house. Initial estimates put the damage at around $30,000, thankfully covered by insurance. I'm still deciding whether to eventually sell the property or keep it. There's something about the land itself that connects me to my father, despite everything that's happened there. As for my stepsister, I'm told she's moved in with her daughter for now. Her son has been texting me occasionally, sharing information about some of the missing items he's trying to track down through family members who might have taken them. He seems genuinely remorseful about what happened, though none of it was his fault. Edit. A lot of people have asked about the letters from my father. Yes, I've shared them with my daughter and my wife. Reading them together has been healing in ways I never expected. I had gone almost 30 years believing my father didn't care enough to leave me anything personal, just legal documents. Finding his actual words, knowing he wanted to prepare me for his absence, and made an effort to leave something meaningful behind. It's changed something fundamental in how I see my childhood. Some wounds never fully heal, but at least now I have his words. The insurance money has been officially released to me, and I've paid off the remainder of our mortgage, about $175. The rest is going into a college fund for my daughter. Sometimes it feels surreal that this situation ended up providing financial security for my family. I wish it hadn't come with so much drama, but I'm grateful for the outcome. Some difficult times can lead to new beginnings. I'm not sure what I'll do with the property yet, but for the first time in decades, I'm at peace with my past.